Hi, I'm Lisa Schaefer, and over the past couple of years I've trained hundreds of people just like you. People who want to get in the best shape of their lives, no matter what shape they're in. Whether you're a stay-at-home mom or professional athlete, kettlebell training has something to offer. But it all starts with proper form. This DVD is a complement to my best-selling kettlebell manual, Get in the Best Shape of Your Life. Just like the book, the DVD will walk you through each exercise step by step. I'd like to take this moment to introduce you to Jeff. He'll be my assistant during the DVD. Are you ready? Let's get started. This is the kettlebell basics. And basically, these are moves that you're going to do during your kettlebell lifts that you need to learn how to do properly for safety and to build a strong foundation for your kettlebell lifts. We're going to start off with the hip snap. Hip snap is so important. It's the one thing that people tend to leave out, especially when performing swings. So I want to have Jeff do it slowly and talk him through it, and then we'll speed it up so you can get a look at it. So he's going to squat by pushing his glutes out and bending at the hips, and then stand up. And as he stands up in explosive lockout, he squeezes his glutes, tightens his abs, and tightens his quads at the same time. So if you do 5 slow for that, there's a shrinking in his midsection here. Okay, now if you'll speed it up, this is a fast, crisp, explosive lockout. Squeezing his glutes, tightening his abs, and tightening his quads all at the same time. Okay, now we're going to work into the rack position. Jeff, if you'll go ahead and clean one kettlebell to the rack position. This is the rack position. His elbow is tucked close into his body. His wrist is straight. He's got the kettlebell sitting on his chest here somewhat. Now, if you're a woman and you have big breasts, you do not want to lay that kettlebell on your chest. You want to rack, you want to rack slightly out to the side just for safety reasons. Okay, and then as he's holding this kettlebell here in the rack position, he's going to keep everything tight down below as well. Squeeze his glutes, tighten his abs, squeeze his quads as well. Okay, now for the double kettlebell racked, I want you to notice everything's the same. Both elbows are close to the body. He's got straight wrists. His hands are touching his chest, and his shoulders are down. He's not shrugging up at all. His shoulders are down. This is the overhead position. There'll be a lot of different kettlebell exercises where you'll need to get into an overhead position. So Jeff, if you'll clean a kettlebell and push press that overhead, I'm just going to point out a few tips. One is his shoulder is down and in his socket. There's no shrugging up here at all. His elbow is locked out solidly, and his bicep is close to his ear and pushed back ever so slightly. Okay. Now can you do 2 for me? Push press 2. It's the same thing with the double overhead position, but he's going to lean into the kettlebell, away from the kettlebell slightly, kind of opening his chest up here. Both elbows completely locked out, shoulders are still down in the sockets, and this requires a lot of tension in your core and your abs as well. This position is commonly referred to as the farmer's hold. So Jeff's going to stand next to the kettlebell. It's going to be outside of his foot. If you bend over and pick that up for me, please. Notice that his shoulders stay square. Go ahead and stand up. This is just the hold. It's like a suitcase position. His shoulders are square with his hips. There's no shrugging of the shoulders here at all. It's really good exercise also if you wanted to walk, and taxes your grip quite a bit. Okay. Now, if there's also a double, so if you'll stand in the middle of the kettlebells, squat down, pick those up. Again, his shoulders stay square, his chest was open, he stands up, his shoulders are down, not shrugging, and he just holds them both to the kettlebells to the side. This position is holding the kettlebell by the horns. If you'll grab that kettlebell. It's almost like holding the kettlebell as like a steering wheel as well, but it's called holding the kettlebell by the horns. He's at chest level, his elbows are bent, they're close to his body. This is punching to the sky. It looks a lot like an overhead position, but the difference is When you're performing a kettlebell drill with the kettlebell overhead and you're moving, you need to learn how to punch to the sky to keep your elbow locked out. So if Jeff raises his arm up, his shoulder stays in the socket down here, his elbow stays locked, his wrist stays straight with the kettlebell in it, and you want to think about elongating your elbow. So this part comes down, this part is moving up, and as you're moving with the kettlebell overhead, you'll keep your elbow locked out that way. Cover a proper squat form and show you what a rock bottom squat is. And Jeff, if you'll show us bend at the hips, push your glutes out as if you're going to sit down in a chair and squat down, and he's going to use his hip flexors to pull himself down. Now this is a rock bottom squat. Not everybody can get into a rock bottom squat. It takes a lot of flexibility. If you can't get down that far, don't worry about it. Stop where you feel a good long stretch, and then just stand back up and lock your hips out up underneath you. So do it again. Push the glutes out, pull himself down with his hip flexors, and then stand back up. I'm going to talk about proper footwear. When you are lifting with kettlebells, it's important to wear a flat-soled shoe or lift barefooted. What you don't want to wear is a running shoe or any kind of shoe with some cush in the bottom of it. The reason for that is you have receptors in the bottom of your feet that sends a message to your brain as to what muscles need to be activated. And if you're wearing a soft-soled shoe or a cushy shoe, you're going to get some bad feedback from the bottoms of your feet. Basically, your feet need to feel the ground, the hard ground. And also for stability reasons, you don't want to get knocked off balance if you have a cushy shoe. This is the two-arm swing, and this is the foundation for all kettlebell drills. It's extremely important that you become very proficient in this exercise before you move on to others, since it is the foundation. So what I want to go over first is proper stance. Jeff, if you'll bend at the hips, and he pushes his glutes out as he's sitting, like he's going to sit down in a chair. The kettlebell is slightly behind his heels. He's going to keep his chest open wide and his head out, looking out to the horizon. You always want to keep your head up, don't ever look down. Now he grasps the kettlebell with two hands, and he's going to stand up, and if you'll notice, the kettlebell doesn't come up too high right at first. That's fine. He's squeezing his glutes, tightening his abs, and pulling his quads up. Or tightening his quads as hard as he can. It's a snap. It's fast, it's explosive. His arms are loose, but they're straight. So you don't want to pull this kettlebell up with your arms. Think of it as a lower body drill, and no shrugging. His shoulders are down. This is a one-arm swing. It's a variation of the two-arm swing, and it's basically everything is the same as the two-arm kettlebell swing, but you're only grasping the kettlebell with one arm. This will increase the intensity of your workout. It'll make the kettlebell swing harder. Basically, the stance is the same. Jeff, if you'll bend at the hips, he pushes glutes out as if he's sitting in the chair to load up his hamstrings. The kettlebell is in the same position, back by his heels, so he grasps the kettlebell with one hand. The other arm is going to just stay at his side, not to be rested on his hip at all, just stay at the side. His chest is open, his head is up. So if you go ahead and perform a few swings. And the hip drive here is squeeze his glutes, tighten his abs, and tighten his quads hard at the top. This is a one-arm clean. This is a really good exercise for cardio and also to get the kettlebell up into the racked position safely. so you can do other exercises. Everything on the bottom part of the exercise is the same as it is with the swing. It's just that you have a midline, down the midline of your body, and you're going to pull the kettlebell up, or Jeff's going to pull the kettlebell up, punch it up with the elbow staying close to the body the whole time. So it's not a shrug with your shoulders, your shoulders still stay down. The power is generated through your hips. So Jeff, if you'll show the stance, as the same with the swing. He's bending at the hips, he's pushing his glutes out, loading up his hamstrings here. His chest is open, his head is up. Go ahead and do a couple of, there you go. He's pulling that kettlebell up the middle of his body. His elbow is staying close to his ribs. And then he's getting back, and he's getting into the rack position if you hold it there. Remember from the kettlebell basics that the rack position is a straight line, a straight wrist, not bent, not pulled in this way. It's a straight wrist. Perfect kettlebell rack position. Good. He's not shrugging. He's not pulling that weight up with his shoulders. The weight is being popped up by the force of his hips. This is a double clean. It's great for increasing your hip drive power, cardio, and strength endurance. Everything is the same on the bottom. Jeff, if you'll bend at the hips, push your glutes out, grasp 2 kettlebells, and pull them up the midline of your body. Here we go. And he's wrapping his hands, he's getting his hands around and punching up. Go ahead and do a few more reps, please. Good. He's pulling both of them straight up his body. His elbows are close to his ribs, and his shoulders are down. There's no shrugging. Good, crisp hip snap with this. You have to have it. You have to, or you won't get the kettlebells up. Squeeze your glutes, tighten your abs, squeeze your quads. Front squat, it's a lower body exercise, great for your quads, your glutes, and your abs. You start in the rack position, and what you're going to do is bend at the hips, push your glutes out, and you're going to actively pull yourself down with your hip flexors, and then push your feet through the floor, stand back up, and lock your hips out up at the top. So if you do a few more reps for me, please. Bend at the hips, push your glutes out, actively pull yourself down slowly with your hip flexors. Can you do a few more? And you also want to make sure that your knees are in line with your toes. No bowing in of the knees over the toes. Keep them in line. Keep your wrist straight as well in the rack position. And his other arm here is just either out to the side or in the front, but don't put your hand on your hips or on your quads. Double front squat. You're going to clean 2 kettlebells to the rack position. Hold them in the rack position. Bend at the hips, push your glutes out, and pull yourself down with your hip flexors. Now push your feet to the floor and stand up. Lock your hips out up underneath you. This is great for your core when you add 2 kettlebells to the exercise. Your abs get a great workout. Okay, now notice where his kettlebells are racked. There's an alternate rack position. We show them the alternate rack position where you flare your elbows out, make a little shelf for the kettlebells, and now front squat. The only problem with this position is your shoulders will tire out before your legs, but whichever way is more comfortable for you is fine. This is a military press, and it starts from the racked position. So Jeff, if you'll clean the kettlebell with proper form to the rack position, he needs to pressurize and hold this pressurization before and during the move. This builds a virtual belt and protects your back. So he's going to squeeze his glutes, tighten his abs, and squeeze his quads really hard. For added power, he's also going to grip his toes to the ground. And then go ahead, Jeff, and perform the military press. You get a good lockout with your elbow up top. His arm is close to his ear, if flexibility allows, and slightly behind. Now, actively pull that kettlebell down with your lats. Think about using your armpit to pull the kettlebell back down to the rack position. Go ahead and push it up. If you'll notice, on these few reps, he's bringing the kettlebell out and pushing up at the same time. Go ahead and pull it back down. Actively pull it down with his lats. Go ahead, pushing out and up at the same time. Go ahead and do 3 more reps, please. The whole time, pressurized. His glutes are tight, his abs are tight, and his quads are tight. Gripping the ground with his toes. If you need to, if you get to a sticking point, squeeze that other hand really tight. Ball that fist up and squeeze the other hand really tight. Gives you a little bit of extra power and strength. This is a double military press, same as the one arms, but you're going to use 2 kettlebells. Your stance needs to be a little bit wider to put both kettlebells between your feet. If you will double clean with proper form, kettlebells to the rack position. He's going to pressurize, squeeze his glutes, tighten his abs, squeeze his quads really hard, grip his toes to the ground, and then press up, out, and up at the same time. Both kettlebells go up at the same time, and actively pull the kettlebells down with your lats, backed into the rack position. Out and up, holding this pressurization at both at the same time, and back down. 1 more rep, please. One special point to note is his shoulders stay down. He is not shrugging up as he's pressing up. His shoulders stay down. A bent over row, a 1-arm version, and it's a great pulling exercise and lat exercise. So Jeff's going to demonstrate by taking a step out, bending this first knee, and he's going to go ahead and brace himself by putting his elbow or his forearm on his thigh here. Just keep a straight or bent leg back here. He's going to pull that kettlebell off the ground and pull it close to his body. Go ahead, and then lower it slowly back to the ground. So do 5 reps for us, please. Head stays up, shoulders stay square with the hips. The kettlebell lunge. It's a great lower body drill. We're going to show you 3 different variations. Okay, Jeff, if you'll hold the kettlebell, get the kettlebell on the by the horns position, chest level, and he's going to step out, put his weight on a forward foot and then push back into position. And with the kettlebell hold being held by the horns, you can alternate legs back and forth. Tip with this is you don't want your knee going over your toes. Okay? And your back knee should not touch the ground. It could be about an inch or so from the ground, but not touch the ground. Okay, now the other variation is he's going to hold it in the rack position, so if you clean it and put it in the rack position. Now this variation, you're going to do one side at a time. So if you'll go ahead and give me 3 reps. The bottom part of the move is the same. The difference is he's holding the kettlebell in the rack position. Gives you kind of a counterbalance act going on here because you don't have a weight on this side. And now if you'll clean it and do 3 more on the other side. Remember, knees stay in line with the toes, and the back knee does not touch the ground. Okay, and now the third variation is the double lunge. You're going to rack 2 kettlebells. Now this involves a lot of core work, a lot of ab work. You go ahead and give me 3 legs, or 3 each leg. Because the weight is distributed evenly, you've got a kettlebell on both sides, you can alternate legs. This is walking lunge. It's another variation of the lunge, and it'll work your hamstrings and your glutes a little bit more than the other versions. So if you'll hold the kettlebell by the horns, and then he takes a big giant step out, brings his back foot in front of him, just in a walking position, but he's lunging. Knees are still over the toes, and the back leg does not touch the ground. And just as the stationary version goes, you can also do this exercise with the rack position. As you can see, he's taken a larger step than what he would normally take with the other lunge, and his knees are still over his toes and the back leg is not touching the ground. This is a good morning stretch. It's a great exercise for improving your hamstring flexibility and flexibility in your hips. And the way you start out is you put your feet shoulder distance apart, kettlebell goes between your feet. Jeff, if you'll bend at the hips, push your glutes out, grasp the kettlebell with 2 hands. His chest is open wide, his shoulders are open, his head is looking up. If you'll squeeze that kettlebell off the ground and lift up, he does lock his hips out up at the top by squeezing his glutes and tightening his abs, but it's not explosive. And bend at the hips, push your glutes out, and there's a slight bend in his knees. He stops when he feels the stretch from the top of his glutes all the way down to his ankles. Pauses for a moment, stands back up and locks his hips out at the top. If you go ahead and do 3 more reps of that, please. Back is flat, go ahead and go down. His back is flat, not rounded, it's arched. His glutes are poked out, pushed out. is a Turkish getup and builds great shoulder flexibility and a nice strong core, and it works every muscle in your body. You start laying flat on the ground, kettlebell laying beside you. You want to grab the kettlebell with your arm here, and then he's going to notice he grabs the kettlebell handle with both hands and he's going to roll it up onto his chest. Don't ever do that with one arm. You'll end up hurting your elbow. Okay, now punch the kettlebell up. And it's extremely important that this elbow stay locked out at all times. His shoulder is going to stay down in socket, but he's going to punch that kettlebell to the sky. Now, lift this leg up here. His foot is flat on the ground. He's going to use this foot to roll himself up over onto his shoulder. Keep driving with your heel here, up onto his elbow, and then onto his hand. Now, at this point, he's going to switch his legs. This leg leans forward, and he's going to push himself up into a lunge position, the whole time keeping this elbow locked and looking up at the kettlebell. And now stand up, lock your hips up underneath you, and then reverse the move. This leg comes back, down to his knee. He touches his hand to the ground. Now his elbow, his hip's on the ground, now he goes down to his elbow, onto his shoulder, and rolls back onto his back. I'm going to do it 2 more times, please. Driving with his heel, roll up to his hand, switch his feet, stands up, locks out, reverses the move. Back down to his hand, his elbow, his shoulder, and his back. Okay, for this third rep, we're going to do it real time. We're not going to slow it down. This is one fluid motion with a Turkish getup. Stand up straight and then back down. Reverse the move. As you can see, I didn't break the move down. It's one fluid motion to get up. And then lowers the kettlebell back down with 2 arms safely onto the ground. This is push press. This is a great exercise for building shoulder strength endurance and also for working yourself into a heavier kettlebell. Go ahead and get into the rack position, Jeff, please. One kettlebell to the rack position. What's going to happen here is he's going to dip down slightly, about a quarter squat, and he's going to drive up explosively, driving his hips forward and push the kettlebell up at the same time. Go ahead and show him. And with this exercise, it's not a strict press, so it's okay to let gravity pull this down for you. You just guide it back into the rack position. But he's squatting a quarter squat, squeezing his glutes, tightening his abs at the top, and explosively driving his hips forward. His hips and his legs are helping push the kettlebell up. It's double push press. It's basically the same as a one-arm push press, but you're going to have to dip down a little bit lower and use a little bit more leg drive to get both kettlebells up. So please rack 2 kettlebells to the starting position. He's going to dip down and push up at the same time. Go ahead and give me 3 reps, please. 2, okay? As he dips down and comes up, kettlebells go up at the same time. Legs are driving up and kettlebells are driving up at the same time. This is a windmill. It's an excellent core exercise. It's also great for building shoulder flexibility and hip flexibility. And I want to go over the stance, and he's going to do this as a body weight first so you can see the motion. So his feet are facing forward, but I want him to shift them slightly to the side. He's going to have the kettlebell in his left hand, so he's going to push his weight over to the side. All of his weight is pushing up against my hand. He's going to take this glute and push it out and slightly up. Now he's going to, remember the kettlebell is supposed to be in this hand, so he's going to take this hand and run it down his leg slightly with a twisting motion at the torso. Go down as low as he can, as low as your flexibility will allow you, at the whole time keeping your weight on this loaded hip here. Now he's going to squeeze this glute right here and stand back up. Now this kettlebell, with a kettlebell over your head, he has to look up at it at all times. Okay, so if you go ahead and pick up the kettlebell, get it overhead. You can push press it or snatch it overhead, however you like. Now, he's shifted his feet slightly to the side. Kick your weight out here. All of his weight is kicked out here. Keep a really good lock on that elbow. And now twist ever so slightly, keeping his eye on the kettlebell. And he's going to touch the ground and then stand back up. Now, he has extreme flexibility. He can go way out and put his hand on the ground. If you can't, can you go ahead and put the kettlebell back overhead? Run your hand along the side and the inside of your leg. Push the weight out here, twist ever so slightly. Touch the ground. If you can't touch the ground, that's fine. And then stand back up. This is underleg pass. It's a great exercise for your core, your lower back, your abs, and your legs. It's very simple. You stand with your feet just a little bit wider than shoulder distance apart, kettlebell in the middle. And Jeff, if you'll bend at the hips, push your glutes back. He's going to grab the kettlebell with one hand and start passing. He goes around his knees and passes the kettlebell from hand to hand between his legs. Around the knees, hand to hand between his legs, making a figure-8 pattern between his legs. His head stays up, his shoulders stay up, his chest stays open. You want a semi-flat back on this. And it's great for cardio and hand-eye coordination as well. The alternate version of the underleg pass is to take a little bit wider stance and put a little bit of a lunge to it as you're passing. So Jeff, you go ahead. He goes around his knee and he's going to lunge from side to side as he passes the kettlebell under his hands. And what this does is it works your inside of your legs a little bit more than your quads. The other version is heavy on the quads. This version will work the inside of your legs more. This is a one-arm deadlift. It's a great core exercise, really good exercise for working your obliques. It's fairly simple. You stand with your feet shoulder distance apart, kettlebells on the outside of your foot, and bend at the, Jeff, if you'll do it as I say it, bend at the hips, push your glutes out, squat down just low enough so you can grab that kettlebell with your hand, and then stand straight back up. You give me 5 reps on that. The points to remember is to keep your chest open, keep your shoulders square with your hips. So what you want to do is think about having a kettlebell in your other hand. So there's not going to be any of this side stuff like that. Shoulders are square with the hips. And he's going to lock his hips out underneath him when he stands up. So he's going to squeeze his glutes, tighten his abs at the lockout. This is the RKC snatch, also known as a hard style snatch. It's great for overall body work and cardio. And I'm going to show you quickly just a demo with the body weight so I can explain it as we go. The starting position is the same as with the one arm swing. You bend at the hips, push your glutes out. I'm going to pretend like I grasp the kettlebell. I'm going to stand up explosively, get a hip snap, pull ever so slightly with my shoulder, and then punch up at my head and lock out overhead. Okay, so I'm going to have Jeff show you with the kettlebell. Bend at the hips, push your glutes out. He grasps the kettlebell, stands up explosively with a hip snap, a slight pull on his shoulder. Can you do it a few more times, please? There's a slight pull on his shoulder here, a punch up about head level. Go ahead, keep going. A punch up about head level, and then he locks out overhead. Now to get the kettlebell down, he's just flipping it over his hand and guiding it down. Gravity takes it down at that point. What's getting this kettlebell up is the power coming from his hips. There's no shrugging, he's not pulling it up with his arms. The power, all of it, is coming from his hips. Great hip snap, slight pull back of the shoulder, punch through the kettlebell, and then lock out overhead. This is a punch press. It's a very simple exercise. It will give you upper body endurance and work your chest muscles a little bit more. If you'll pick the kettlebell up by the horns, you start with the kettlebell by the horns at chest level. You punch it straight out in front of you and pull it straight back. The tempo of this exercise is fast. And the whole time he's doing this, he's also squeezing his glutes and tightening his abs to build a sturdy base. I hope you enjoyed this DVD and found the instruction helpful. Please visit my website at nofearfitness.com and let me know what you think. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email updates. Thanks again for watching, and I look forward to hearing about your progress.